After all the doors that Seiyu units opened in the 70s, 80s and 90s, the Seiyu and music industries were now with a lot of curiosity about what voice actors could pull off next. And seeing the achievements that the Seiyu units in those 3 decades had, Seiyu started to try their luck, launching Seiyu units like crazy. Let's have a look at the complex and oftentimes weird noughties, a decade of experimentation to no end, of brief endeavors in the music industry, in which Seiyu units tried to be unique. Let's kick off this episode of Seiyu Lounge. Welcome to Seiyu Lounge. I am your host Vanessa, and today's topic is the third generation of Seiyu units, the noughties. This is one of the most fascinating eras for Seiyu units. The variety and the sheer number of Seiyu units that debuted during this decade were unreal. Like all experimental things, many Seiyu units failed to impress and crashed and burned with their first CD. Others managed to thrive and ended up having a body of work they can now be proud of. And of course, many were the radio and anime projects that started to embrace the idea of creating units stemming from those. How was the music panorama for Seiyu units in the noughties? The noughties were the stage for a boom in solo debuts, the second boom, and the kickoff of character songs thanks to the Angelique Otome Games series. The music industry was welcoming of Seiyu, but many, if not all, were considered niche, and none managed to break free from the stereotype that Seiyu were bad singers, given how everyone, even those without singing skills, were taking a shot at making easy money by releasing music for their fans. When it came to Seiyu units, there was a little bit of everything. Seiyu units with genuine care for their music and presentation. Seiyu units stemming from radio shows were more relaxed in their approach to their music. Seiyu units stemming from anime series that were meant to not last long. Seiyu units that debuted for fun but ended up taking their work seriously. Seiyu units clearly only debuting to cash in quickly in what was, seemingly, a trend. There was a little bit of everything, something that makes this generation quite complex to talk about without coming across dodgy Seiyu units. All of this was happening because there was genuine curiosity from the public, in this case, Seiyu and anime fans, about what could Seiyu units accomplish next. It seemed like 90s Seiyu units had done it all, but something was missing there. How to make popularity last? How to be consistent, how to create a sound that will engage others, how to have a career that can be remembered decades later. Those were big questions, and only a couple of those ended up being answered in this third generation of Seiyu units. Which music genres were prominent? The noughties were all about rock music, pop rock, power ballads, pure rock, classic rock inspired tunes. It seems like Seiyu units were finding it easier to present themselves as a band to grab the attention of Seiyu fans. This wasn't necessarily wrong as a strategy, but you can safely say that many Seiyu units sounded the same between them, something that makes this era less colorful and innovative than the previous 3 decades. But some Seiyu units went the extra mile and tried to innovate. R&B was a big music genre among Western or international artists in the early noughties, and some units tried their luck with the music genre to awesome results. Visual Kei found its place with one Seiyu unit taking inspiration from Vice's vibe while going all out on the makeup and aesthetics department. Pop was still a big bet, being one of the most consistent music genres there is, catchy and always following the trends. And yes, Seiyu started to follow trends, something that you can quickly and easily notice when you listen to their music, and it sounds like all other music released in a specific date. when there was a trend for that specific sound. You can tell that there was an effort in trying to emulate what 90s Seiyu units had done, however the results were less satisfactory or impressive than what those had achieved in the past. Influences. Naughty Seiyu units were embracing rock music like crazy. Of course, Seiyu units in the 70s, 80s and 90s had previously explored rock music, but had not made it, aside from Vice, in the 90s, their greeting card. So while the work by EMU and Vice was a direct inspiration and motivation to kick off Seiyu units, their sound was not a direct influence, and that is because the era had changed. The sound that EMU and Vice had sounded extremely dated in the early noughties. Rock and R&B were the big trends in the music industry, and Seiyu units wanted to be trendy. Nothing wrong with that. EMU and Vice's successful experiences certainly served as a motivation for Seiyu to try their luck. If they were successful, we can also be if we follow what they did. While that was a good starting mindset, few were the Seiyu units that thought beyond it. Actually, I believe only one Seiyu unit in this generation thought outside of the box. 70s and 80s Seiyu units were not an inspiration for this generation, even if the sound naughty Seiyu units were exploring was closer to their sound, more so than with what 90s Seiyu units had done. Music quality. Quality got a massive bump in this generation. The recordings had a professional touch. You could actually take some songs out of context and show them to someone that knows nothing about Seiyu, and they'd genuinely enjoy those. There was a focus on the creation, composition, and performances sides of the music industry. You have songs produced in this generation that 20 years later still sound good. This is something you couldn't even say about 90s music in the noughties or even 70s and 80s music in the 90s. Noughties music has, in general, aged well. Of course, some music genres will sound a bit dated, as those are not the trend right now. But if you listen to the CD versions of those songs and not heavily compressed, low-quality versions of the songs on YouTube, you'll notice just how much quality there was in the music created in the noughties. The performances were really of three styles: trying to sound cool while sounding uncomfortable, really stable on the technique but without emotion, and completely comfortable and surprisingly technical. There were more of the first two, but still there were few Seiyu that stood out for their singing skills in the noughties: Wataru Hatano, Shotaro Morikubo, Tatsuhisa Suzuki, and Kisho. All went on to having long solo careers or founding their own rock bands and have equally long careers. Stemming from radio, anime, music projects, or TV shows. Due to the impact that the Angelique Otome game series had in the music industry by introducing the concept of character songs and making it widely known and common, you can say that games, radio shows, and anime were the major sources of Seiyu units. 2D music projects were still not a thing back then, and although you can say that there were attempts at that by the Kiniro no Korda franchise, it was never a 2D music franchise, and its flagship group, Stella Quintet, was never presented as a group to represent the project. It was genuinely the group in charge of performing the theme songs for the anime or games in the franchise, nothing more. Units that marked this generation of Seiyu units. This was a generation that spawned over 30 different Seiyu units between Gaia, Smiley Spiky, Ignition, PKO, Otome Bancho, Stella Quintet, Devil Angel, Dear Boys, and R16. Those Seiyu units made quite the impact from 2000 to 2006, however, true creativity and success started to appear in the Seiyu units debuted from 2006 up until the end of the decade. So I'll be keeping this section to the ones that actually ended up bringing new things to the music industry for Seiyu units, and eventually solo artists. Cell Division. This is quite possibly one of the most obscure Seiyu units out there, to this date one that many Seiyu fans don't even know about. Cell Division was a Seiyu unit comprised of Wataru Hatano and Tatsuhisa Suzuki. I'm talking about an interesting young Seiyu in Tatsuhisa Suzuki and an actor and Seiyu that had yet to make an impact in the Seiyu industry in Wataru Hatano. So right off the bat, this was a Seiyu unit that wouldn't necessarily attract a lot of people given how both were far from being popular voice actors. The Seiyu unit stemmed from the radio show Kurahashi Tokia Saejima Kazuna Cell Division no Otoko Hanashishitsu Jusan and its drama CDs. This was the first Seiyu unit in this third generation to actually bring a lot of quality to the spotlight. Wataru Hatano had insane control over his sweet baritone vocals and showed a lot of technique in every song. He still does have those. And Tatsuhisa Suzuki arrived as a rising talent that was taking his first steps as a pop-rock solo artist, showing a lot of promise as a versatile singer. The Seiyu unit went on to release 2 singles in the 2 years they were active, Song of Morning and One Night Stand Ai Tai. The one thing that impresses me the most is how Cell Division did something no other Seiyu unit was doing. They embraced R&B music, delivering a set of romantic, some borderline suggestive songs in which their vocals shone. Wataru Hatano and Tatsuhisa Suzuki had fantastic chemistry as singers, complementing each other perfectly, while at the same time bringing to the spotlight another thing no one else was doing: beatboxing and rapping. So you have R&B, beatboxing and rap making their entrance in the Seiyu industry in 2006, something that would take a full 11 years to turn into a trend, especially rap via Hypnosis Mic. With beatboxing only making a return to music as an exciting vocal skill through the ambitious a cappella project Aopella. Before disbanding, the unit held a live show in which they performed the 4 songs they released in those 2 years of activity. It is crazy that a project no one knew about actually was in the forefront in more than just the quality they delivered in terms of the performances. The technique and innovation were there, and it is quite unfortunate that the unit didn't get the love it deserved when it was active. Hiroshi Kamiya and Daisuke Ono. The Golden Duo. This is how Hiroshi Kamiya and Daisuke Ono are often referred to by Japanese media connected to the Seiyu industry. 2 of the most popular Seiyu active in the industry. 2 of the most awarded Seiyu ever. 2 absolutely awesome radio show hosts. Yes, the Seiyu unit stems from a radio show, one of the most popular radio shows in Japan, Dear Girl Stories. It has ended up spawning live shows, manga, and even games. The unit, Hiroshi Kamiya and Daisuke Ono, kicked off activities in 2007, and since its debut, they have held and sold out multiple live shows, released 17 CDs so far, with 10 of those CDs ranked within Oricon's top 20. This is a power duo that shines more for its amazing personalities, Hiroshi Kamiya and Daisuke Ono being beloved among Seiyu fans, more so than the quality of their performances. The duo's music is generally pop rock. There's nothing fancy about it. Actually, they don't need their sound to be fancy to be catchy and please their fans. Their vocals waver a bit in quality, but while the Seiyu unit kicked off activities with both Kamiya and Ono not being good singers, they've grown a whole lot, and right now they not only have the chemistry as a duo, but are also decent singers. One thing you can notice from the success Hiroshi Kamiya and Daisuke Ono have had is that they are performing music as a way to cash in on the radio show's popularity. Scrap that whole thing about Seiyu units performing music for fun, something that those in the 70s and 80s had. These unities primarily focused on capitalizing on the show's popularity. Nothing wrong with that, but you start noticing that lack of passion and fun in creating music in their sound and performances. This of course may not even bother you, but those more sensitive to it will notice, for example, if you compare music from 70s and 80s Seiyu units to that music of Hiroshi Kamiya and Daisuke Ono, because, right now their music lacks heart. Singing is a job there, nothing more. Being in that Seiyu unit is a business more than a passion. Once again, this is an observation on my end, and this comes from me, a massive fan of Daisuke Ono. Observation aside, what Hiroshi Kamiya and Daisuke Ono have accomplished is impressive, showing that Seiyu units stemming from radio shows can indeed be popular, sell well, and leave a mark in the Seiyu industry. They are, at the time of recording this episode, the longest running, 15 years, and most successful Seiyu unit, which is downright impressive given how they have toned down the live shows and appearances and no longer release music as frequently as they did in their first 10 years of activity. This is a Seiyu unit you can't help but mention for continuing to be active even as Seiyu units have stopped being a trend. J-Addict. J-Addict made its debut in 2009, stemming from the anime series Ghoul-Art Nights. This was something that wasn't necessarily new, but the path the Seiyu unit took was reminiscent of Vice, stemming from Vice Kreutz. There was hype surrounding the group due to that similarity, however, their music was good but wasn't particularly groundbreaking, and the lineup lacked consistency and technique to fully impress. Still, the effort was there, and in 2009, few were the Seiyu units that were as cool as J-Addict was. The Seiyu unit was signed to Lantis and consisted of Yuki Kaji, Kazuma Horie, Abe Atsushi, and Takuma Terashima. During their 3 years of activity, the group disbanded in 2011, J-Addict released 1 mini-album, 2 singles and 1 full-length album. They performed the theme song for the anime series Ghoul-Art Nights and collaborated with, back then, Old Codex's Ron, giving way to one of the unit's best songs, Prism. There is something about J-Addict that I would have loved it had been different. The unit had everything to make a big impact, but Lantis chose to have the unit promoting its music in very specific cases, not having the exposure that Vice in the 90s had, actually breaking through the Vice Kreutz anime or manga and being popular without it. That is a missed opportunity for J-Addict Seiyu unit that I believe could have been much bigger had Lantis been as ambitious as everyone surrounding Vice had been in 1998. Before their disbandment, the unit held a live show and participated in the 2009 and 2010 editions of Orepara, the annual music festival focused on male Seiyu artists, bands and units. Pheromen. Now this is when things started to get really interesting. In the middle of dozens of pop rock Seiyu units, there was one doing things completely differently. And it was bloody awesome. Stemming from the Seiyu unit focused on variety, Starman, arrived Pheromen, the romantic visual K-pop duo consisting of Junichi Suabe and Kosuke Toriumi. If you just felt like this is an awesome concept, just wait until you see them and listen to their music. Pheromen debuted in 2009, signed to Nippon Columbia. This was downright impressive. Never before had a Seiyu unit signed the contract with a major music label. They were serious about their music. Pheromen brought back the tradition of Seiyu within Seiyu units, writing lyrics for their music. It doesn't seem like it, but most Seiyu units in this third generation did not write their lyrics nor music, something that showed once more that singing for them was just a job, that they didn't put their heart into it. Well, Feromen certainly put their heart into it, with Junichi Suabe and Kosuke Toriumi writing lyrics to some of their songs, actually writing lyrics to what are their best songs released to date. Fans coming across Feromen's music have a couple of new things to anticipate: mature romantic lyrics, some borderline suggestive, and the unit's intense visual kei looks that transformed Suabe and Toriumi into completely different people with their colorful wigs and heavy makeup. This was shocking, this was refreshing, and in my opinion, bloody genius. In the middle of the same old same, Feromen was a unit focused on showing Suabe and Toriumi's creativity through their unique visuals and sound. They were unknowingly breaking some barriers in the music industry for seiyuu units and artists. If you look back to the late noughties, early tens, the music and seiyuu industries were starting to favor a certain style or type of look for seiyuu. Feromen couldn't give 2 cents about that. I love this type of attitude. At the same time, Feromen's music always had a pinch of theatricality to it, with grandiose performances, dramatic vocals, and dummy head mic recordings of their music. Yes, you heard it well. Feromen was the first seiyuu unit to release music recorded using a dummy head mic, taking the listener to the action within the song, which is mind-blowing as a concept. To date, there hasn't been any other seiyuu unit to try this, making Feromen quite the innovative seiyuu unit. Unique visuals, unique concept, refreshing, mature music, and innovative details on the recording side of their music. Feromen is, to date, one of the most impressive seiyuu units to ever debut. Since there hasn't been a confirmation by Nippon Columbia about a possible disbandment, as of recording this episode, the unit is on a long hiatus since 2016. Cell Division, J-Addict, Hiroshi Kami and Daisuke Ono, and Feromen stood out from the crowd of seiyuu units, and most if not all of these contributed for the 4th generation of seiyuu units to appear and dominate with a polished sound and image, not afraid to innovate. As you can see, seiyuu units were giving their all to impress their fans. Others went the extra mile to leave a mark and showcase their artistry, while others had the potential to become the next big thing but fluffed it with unexpected approaches to their activities. One thing you can't deny, these seiyuu units have left a mark. Some are even active as I recorded this episode, so you and I don't even know what they can pull off next. But yeah, all these seiyuu units, Cell Division, J-Addict, Hiroshi Kami and Daisuke Ono, and Feromen have made sure to innovate and give back to the seiyuu units that followed, which is commendable. So tell me, what do you think was the most impressive thing seiyuu units pulled off in the noughties? Is there any seiyuu unit from this generation that you'd love to have back or to release more music? Let me know in the comments on YouTube. And remember, leave your comments as complex or as simple as they may be, and you can be featured on upcoming episodes of Seiyuu Lounge. If you enjoyed this episode and don't want to miss the Hand That Feeds HQ's weekly male seiyuu and music-related content, hit the subscribe button. I'll return next week with another episode of Seiyuu Lounge. Thank you for listening and see you guys around.